Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today I'll be reviewing this, my new Harbor Freight 40-pound floor model abrasive blast cabinet. Recently I've been doing some fairly high volume knife models that I need abrasive blasting for. Now I have an abrasive blaster, but it's pretty old, pretty cheap, and it was just time to give the old blast cabinet the heave-ho and bring in a new model. So this is where I landed. So first I'm going to talk about the assembly of the machine or the cabinet and the features of the equipment. Then I'll talk about the operation of the cabinet, including some basics about how to set up and use an abrasive blast cabinet. Now I know many people who'd be interested in a blast cabinet are not knife makers, so I'm going to have plenty of information for you. I'm going to keep most of this pretty generic. But knife makers, if you hang around to the end, I'll drop a few hints about how you might want to use abrasive blasters in knife making. All right, let's get started. The model I bought from Harbor Freight is a floor standing model. I paid $229 for it, and it comes unassembled in this box. It's a 40-pound model, meaning you can dump 40 pounds or so of abrasive media into the hopper. The more media you have, the less you have to change it. So first, putting the thing together. I rate it as a 2-shirt build, meaning that in August in Georgia, you're going to sweat through 2 shirts before you get this thing done. I also give it a 4-letter word rating of 6.7, meaning that there was a moderate amount of swearing involved in putting the cab together. It took me a good 4 hours to complete the job. There are about 100 bolts involved, many of them in fairly hard to reach places. That's why you'll see me lying on the floor occasionally. I probably would have assembled it on a workbench, but this was the best location in my shop to film it. Amazingly, only 1 bolt was missing, which is pretty good for something this complicated. The design's pretty solid, nothing super hard to figure out, although the directions, I'm being charitable here, are a little sketchy and don't document various manufacturing upgrades that seem to be made to the cabinet. By and large, the many bolt holes lined up without requiring excessive amounts of hammering, which is another way of saying you may need to employ a little judicious use of the 16-ounce persuader in order to get some of the holes mated properly. Just a quick note about abrasive blasting cabinets while I'm still running around building this thing. If you're watching this, you probably know this already, but these gizmos are intended to allow you to blow a stream of abrasive materials through a little gun using compressed air. You can strip rust, scale, old paint, and general crud off of objects, giving them a soft, matte finish in the process. In my case, I use mine primarily to finish knives, but they're generally used for refinishing metal parts and tools. These abrasives are flying around at really high speeds and they can hurt or blind you, so keeping them isolated inside a cabinet, generally the best way to fly. Anyway, eventually it all came together, and in the grand scheme of things, no major complaints. If you haven't used blast cabinets before, you definitely want to caulk the seams or you'll have blast media all over your floor. Also, the little barb fitting and hose into the gun are pretty chintzy, so I pulled the fitting and ran my hose straight into the gun. This meant I had to file out the hole for the hose, which was too small. There's no gasket there, so eventually I'll need to put something in the hole so that I don't saw the hose in half. Typically, blast cabinets are sold with a cabinet and a little gun, and that's it. You have to supply the air. This means your own external hosing, fittings, compressed air, and any sort of vacuum or air filtration you might want. And that's what we've got here. So, if you're planning to buy a cabinet, bear in mind that if you don't have compressed air, you'll be shelling out more money for that. Fortunately, I've got a built-in compressed air system in my shop, so for me it's just a matter of plugging into the wall. In my old shop, I used a 15-gallon 5 CFM compressor, which was just way too small to run large batches of work. The gun pulls air faster than a small compressor can pump it out, so you'd be constantly waiting on the compressor to catch up. The bigger the compressor you get, and more importantly, the more cubic feet per minute it produces, the happier you'll be.
On the other hand, if you just do onesie-twosie type work, you don't need to get a huge compressor. The window is supplied with a glass pane and a protective plexiglass cover. I skipped the plexiglass cover. It's hard enough to see into these things as it is. There are also interior stick-on plastic protectors for the inside of the window. You definitely want to keep changing these out over time, or you'll wear through them and then etch the glass and you won't be able to see anything. Very easy to pop the little cover off and pop in a new piece of glass that you can get from a hardware store. I globbed tons of the supplied silicone caulk everywhere to make sure that the many seams in the sheet metal were sound. It has foam gaskets pre-installed, but still, skip this step and it'd probably leak like a sieve. But, as it worked out, I didn't notice any media falling on the floor, so all my globbing must have paid off. There's a built-in LED light, but it's so dim that I really rely more on overhead lighting than on the interior light for operation. There's a port on the side for air to vent through. You can cap it if you want with the supplied cap, but I'd recommend at least connecting a shop vac. If you don't suck out the dust, not only is it harder to see your work inside, but the positive pressure created by the compressed air will drive dusty air out through the cracks and you'll be breathing all that abrasive crap. Again, this is kind of a temporary setup, but for a small shop where you're not using the blaster constantly, this actually works pretty well. The more you use one, though, the more justification there is for a dedicated vent and filtration system. Access is through a door on the side. It's a bit of a reach to the far side of the cabinet, but the door is big enough you can actually lean inside. The supplied protective gloves allow you to hold items and blast away at them without removing all the skin from your hands. Operation's simple. Dump abrasive into the hopper. The gun pulls abrasive up through a siphon. Your air blasts the abrasive out through the nozzle, and then it falls back into the hopper so it can be used over and over again. When you need to change abrasive, because they do break down after a while, the hopper drains out of this crudely latched little flap. I'd keep an empty bucket under it just in case the junky little latch should ever fail, but so far so good. So how does it work? Well, fine. I mean, are some parts like the gun crude or a little flimsy? Sure. But you bought this thing from Harbor Freight. What else would you expect? It works. Bottom line, this cabinet is about what you'd expect from Harbor Freight. A little rough around the edges, but enormously good value for the money. For me, this is a huge upgrade from my previous benchtop model. It's pretty solidly constructed, better window, better visibility, the gloves stay put and don't constantly yank off the flanges they mount to, which seems like nothing but is a pretty big deal. On my previous cabinet, the gloves were always working their way off the flanges and they're a big pain in the neck to reinstall. Drawbacks? The little door latch is cheap and slaps your hand every time you open it. Like I said, the interior light's pretty dim. The gun's pretty cheap and you have to mod the cabinet a little if you want to pull a decent hose straight into the cab. Now look, I haven't used multi-$1,000 cabinets, so I'm sure that if that's an option to you, they have some advantages over this one in terms of durability. But for occasional use, home shops, farms, small production machine shops, and of course knife makers like me, I really can't see spending much more money than this. So, all in all, great value, great bang for the buck. Now, I promised all you knife makers out there a quick little primer about how you can use abrasive blasters for knife making. Basically, if you make production type knives, you can make a super nice, well-designed, perfectly heat-treated, and well-constructed blade, and then go broke on the cosmetic stages of polishing, hand sanding, or otherwise finishing the blade. Abrasive blasting is one of several methods including tumbling, surface conditioning belts, various coatings like Cerakote, that will give you a decent finish without spending eons on hand sanding, hand polishing, or whatever. There are a variety of different media available, including glass beads, walnut shells, coal grit, and aluminum oxide. I eventually settled on aluminum oxide, which gives a very even matte finish. Glass beads are another good option, but they require a bit more preliminary finish work. In some cases, this may mean resurface grinding or other expensive and time-consuming approaches. Aluminum oxide finishes are a bit less durable than bead blasting though, so I'd recommend that if you want to do blast finishes, you try several approaches and see what works best for your style of knife. When I first started using a blaster, I would finish grind my bevels to get rid of any potential decarb. Eventually I came to the conclusion that this was wasted effort. The way I sharpen my knives, I haven't noticed any difference in performance, so I just finish grind the blades before heat treat, then blast them, add the handles, and give another finishing blast. Then I make sure to sharpen them through any potential decarb on the edge. The end result is a very even, predictable finish that works great for tactical and outdoor knives where you want an unobtrusive, low reflectivity finish.
So I hope that was helpful to you. If you've got any ideas to help viewers get the most out of their blast cabinets, or if you've got tips for the use of this equipment in knife making, by all means, leave a comment down below.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.